The price of betrayal. A story of survival and rebirth. Her wheelchair left deep ruts in the soft earth as her husband pushed her deeper and deeper into the dense forest. The sun was setting, casting long, skeletal shadows that seemed to reach for her. "Where exactly are we going, Richard?" she asked, fighting to keep the tremor out of her voice. His answer was cold, distant, and terrifying. "To a place where you will no longer be a burden." From the shadows of the trees, invisible eyes were watching them, and what happened next would change everything forever. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life Crumbles. Seattle, Washington. Claire Sterling had been the picture of success. At 32, she ran her own interior design firm in downtown Seattle. She was married to her college sweetheart, Richard Sterling, and they lived in a beautifully renovated Victorian home in Queen Anne. Her Instagram-worthy life was the envy of friends and family alike. Their love story had begun 12 years earlier at the University of Washington, where Claire was studying design and Richard was pursuing his business degree. They met in a campus coffee shop when Claire accidentally spilled her latte on Richard's economics textbook. What started as an embarrassed apology turned into a 4-hour conversation, and by the end of the week, they were inseparable. But there had been another significant person in Claire's college life, Adrian Cross, her ex-boyfriend. Adrian was different from Richard in every way, intense, principled, and possessed of a quiet strength born of a difficult childhood. He was studying on an ROTC scholarship, planning to join the Special Forces after graduation. Adrian and Claire had a deep connection, but they wanted different things. He was committed to military service, potentially deploying to dangerous war zones. Claire wanted stability, to build her design business in one place. Breaking up with him was one of the hardest things Claire had ever done, until the accident. The accident Claire referred to happened 3 years into her marriage with Richard. She was driving home from a client meeting during a torrential downpour on I-5 when a hydroplaning truck swerved into her lane. The resulting crash severed her spinal cord, leaving her with permanent paralysis from the waist down. Medical bills piled up quickly, even with insurance. Claire's design business suffered as she spent months in rehabilitation, learning to navigate life in a wheelchair. Initially, Richard played the role of the devoted husband, telling everyone how brave his wife was, how they would get through this together. But behind closed doors, a different reality was emerging. Sighs of frustration when he had to help her transfer from her wheelchair to the bed. Complaints about how her medical expenses were cramping their lifestyle. Comments about how their house wasn't designed for this situation. 6 months after the accident, Richard convinced Claire to sign over control of her business to him, temporarily, while she focused on her recovery. Shortly after, he hired a young assistant named Valerie, beautiful, able-bodied, and increasingly present in their home. Claire wasn't stupid. She could see how they looked at each other. She could feel that she was becoming an inconvenience in her own marriage. But she was still recovering, still adapting to life in a chair. As Richard took more control over Claire's business and finances, he simultaneously distanced himself from their marriage. Date nights stopped. Intimacy disappeared. He began staying late at the office. Claire's friends, many of whom found her disability uncomfortable to deal with, gradually stopped visiting. Her world shrank to the walls of her house, which felt less like a home every day. Despite all this, Claire never suspected how far Richard would go to remove her from his life. She believed that, despite everything, some remnant of love remained, a belief that would be shattered on a crisp autumn evening, 14 months after her accident. The day had started like any other. Richard left for work early. Claire moved through her increasingly lonely house in her wheelchair, trying to focus on a small freelance design project she had managed to secure without Richard's knowledge. A text from Richard late in the afternoon surprised her. "Taking you somewhere special tonight. Be ready at 7 o'clock. Dress warm." After months of emotional neglect, this unexpected gesture sparked a flicker of hope in Claire's heart. Maybe he was finally accepting their new reality. Maybe he wanted to reconnect. When Richard returned home, he seemed strangely energetic, helping Claire into a warm sweater and jacket with an efficiency that felt clinical rather than affectionate. As he loaded her wheelchair into the back of his SUV, Claire noticed a suitcase in the trunk. "Are we going somewhere overnight?" she asked. "Just be patient," Richard replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's a surprise." As they drove out of the city and into the rural foothills of the Olympic Peninsula, Claire's initial excitement gave way to confusion, then unease. When Richard turned onto a narrow logging road deep in the national forest, alarm bells began to ring in her mind. "Richard, where are we going? There's nothing out here." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Can't you just trust me for once without so many questions?" The harshness in his voice silenced her, and they continued driving in tense silence, deeper and deeper into the dark forest as night fell. What Claire couldn't know was that they were being followed. A black pickup truck maintained a discreet distance behind them, its driver's face hidden in shadow, his eyes never losing sight of Richard's SUV. This mysterious follower was Adrian Cross, Claire's college ex-boyfriend, now a decorated veteran, who had recently returned to civilian life after 3 tours of duty. Adrian had been trying to reconnect with old friends, including Claire, only to discover through social media comments about her accident and the strange absence of any recent photos or updates on her life. Concerned, he had decided to drive by her house that afternoon, only to see her being helped into Richard's SUV, looking confused and vulnerable. Something about Richard's body language, the furtive way he had loaded her wheelchair, had triggered Adrian's finely tuned instincts. Without a clear plan, he had decided to follow them, keeping a safe distance on the increasingly remote roads. Back in the SUV, Claire's heart raced when Richard finally stopped in a small, desolate clearing. The headlights illuminated nothing but trees stretching in every direction. "Richard, you're scaring me. What are we doing here?" He turned off the engine and sat in silence for a long moment before answering. "You know, Claire, I really tried, but this isn't the life I signed up for." Cold fear washed over her as he continued. "The business is suffering because of your medical bills. We're drowning in debt. I can't keep living like this." "What are you saying?" Claire whispered, though deep down she already knew. Richard got out of the car, walked around to her side, and opened the door. The night air was biting against her face as he roughly pulled her wheelchair from the back and unfolded it. "I'm saying goodbye, Claire." With clinical efficiency, he transferred her from the car to the wheelchair, placing her purse in her lap. Claire's hands trembled as the full horror of what was happening hit her. "You can't leave me here. I'll die out here alone." Richard's face hardened. "You have your phone. Maybe someone will find you, maybe they won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore." He took a small duffel bag from the car and dropped it next to her wheelchair. "There's some water, a blanket, and a flashlight. That's more than you deserve after what you've put me through." Claire's voice cracked as tears streamed down her face. "Richard, please, we can get through this. Whatever is wrong, we can fix it." For a moment, something flickered in Richard's eyes. Maybe regret, maybe hesitation. But then his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened once more. "Valerie is waiting for me. We're starting over, Claire." Claire felt physically sick as the raw reality of her situation hit her. Her pleas turned into screams, but they fell on deaf ears as Richard returned to the SUV, reversed, and drove away, leaving her alone in the clearing. The red glow of his taillights disappearing into the trees. Or so he thought. From his concealed position, Adrian watched in shock and disbelief as the scene unfolded. Years of military training had prepared him for many things, but nothing could have prepared him to witness the woman he once loved being abandoned in a remote forest because of her disability. As Richard's SUV disappeared down the road, Adrian remained motionless, processing what he had just seen. Then, hearing Claire's heartbreaking sobs echoing through the trees, he made his decision. He wouldn't let her die there. Not tonight, not ever. Interaction question. Have you ever stopped to think about the sheer cruelty of this act? What would you do if you found yourself in such a desperate situation? Chapter 2: The Unexpected Rescue. Claire Sterling sat alone in her wheelchair. The forest around her was pitch black beyond the weak circle of light from her phone's flashlight. Her hands shook as she tried to call 911, only to see no service mocking her on the screen. "This can't be happening," she whispered to herself, her breath visible in the cold air. "He wouldn't leave me here to die. Not really." But the empty forest gave no answer, and the cruel truth settled in her heart. Her husband had discarded her, choosing to start a new life with his assistant, rather than honor his vows to stand by her in sickness and in health. Desperation drove her as she tried to wheel herself toward where she thought the road might be. But the forest floor was uneven, covered in fallen leaves and branches. The wheelchair caught on a root, nearly tipping over. Claire let out a scream of frustration that echoed through the trees. "Is anyone there?" she called out, knowing how unlikely it was that anyone would hear her. "Please, help me!" The forest seemed to swallow her words, returning only the distant hoot of an owl and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Time stretched as her panic grew. The temperature was dropping, and in his hasty departure, Richard hadn't given her a chance to take her medication. By morning, the pain would be unbearable. Just when hopelessness threatened to overwhelm her, Claire heard a twig snap somewhere in the darkness beyond the reach of her light. Her head snapped up. "Hello? Is someone there?" Silence. Then the unmistakable sound of footsteps slowly approaching through the underbrush. Claire's heart raced. Was it Richard coming back, having changed his mind? Or was it something entirely different? Someone, or something, that posed an even greater danger? "Who's there?" Her voice trembled as she pointed her phone light toward the sound. The beam caught a tall figure emerging from the trees. A broad-shouldered, solid man, his face partially shadowed by the hood of his jacket. Claire gasped as fear and relief warred within her. The figure stepped closer, and as he moved into the full light, the hood slid back to reveal a face that sent a jolt of recognition through Claire's body. "Adrian?" she gasped, barely believing her eyes. Adrian Cross stood before her, older than the last time she had seen him, his face more weathered, his eyes holding a weight they hadn't carried before. But it was unmistakably him, her college boyfriend, the man she once thought she might spend her life with before their paths diverged. "Claire." His voice was deeper than she remembered, steady and calm despite the bizarre circumstances. "Are you hurt?" For a moment she couldn't speak. The sheer improbability of his presence left her speechless. Then reality crashed back in, and the dam broke. Tears streamed down her face as the words tumbled out. "Richard left me here. He's not coming back. He's with someone else now. He wanted me to die out here." Her voice cracked on the last words. Adrian knelt beside her wheelchair, his expression grave, but controlled. Up close, Claire could see the changes in him. A thin scar along his jawline that hadn't been there before. Eyes that had seen things she couldn't imagine. "I know," he said quietly. "I saw what happened." Claire's tears stopped in confusion. "You saw? How?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "I was following your car. I had a bad feeling when I saw him loading you into the SUV." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've been back in Seattle for a few weeks. I wanted to look you up, see how you were. Then I heard about your accident and how isolated you'd become. Something didn't sit right with me." You were watching our house? Under other circumstances, this might have sounded alarming. But in this moment, Claire could only feel gratitude that someone had cared enough to watch over her. I just drove by today. Call it a soldier's instinct. But the way he was acting, I couldn't just walk away. Adrian stood up and scanned the dark forest around them. We need to get you somewhere warm. My truck is parked about half a mile from here. Claire gestured helplessly to her wheelchair on the uneven ground. I can't exactly walk there. Adrian nodded, his expression softening slightly. I know. I'm going to carry you. Before Claire could protest, Adrian had moved behind her wheelchair and was carefully draping the thick blanket from the duffel bag around her shoulders. I'm too heavy, Claire objected, the flush of shame in her voice. And what about my chair? The chair will have to stay for now. I'll come back for it once you're safe. With gentle efficiency, Adrian slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. And you're not too heavy. I've carried injured men twice your size through worse terrain than this. As he lifted her from the chair, Claire was struck by the surreal nature of the situation. Her husband had abandoned her to die, and now her college ex-boyfriend, whom she hadn't seen in nearly a decade, was carrying her to safety through a dark forest. How did you find me? How did you know where Richard was taking me? She asked, as Adrian navigated carefully between the trees, his movements steady despite the extra weight. I kept a safe distance behind his SUV. When he turned onto the logging road, I knew something was wrong. I parked and followed on foot once you got deep enough. He paused, adjusting his grip slightly. I was about to intervene when he left you, but I wanted to make sure he actually drove away first. Claire's mind raced with questions. Why are you in Seattle? Last I heard you were deployed overseas. Adrian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. 3 tours. I got out 6 months ago. Moved back to the States. Did some private security work for a while. Then decided to come back to the Northwest to settle some unfinished business. Something in his tone made Claire wonder what kind of unfinished business would bring him back after so many years. But she was too exhausted, too overwhelmed by the night's events to ask further. They continued in silence for a while, the only sounds being his breathing and Adrian's careful footsteps on the forest floor. Finally, they emerged onto a narrow dirt track where a black pickup truck was parked, its silhouette barely visible in the gloom. Almost there, Adrian said, his breathing slightly labored from the exertion. He managed to open the passenger door with one hand and gently placed Claire on the seat, making sure the blanket was still tucked securely around her. Thank you, Claire whispered, the full impact of what might have happened without his intervention starting to hit her. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there. Adrian's expression was unreadable as he closed her door and walked around to the driver's side. Let's get you safe. Then we can figure out what to do next. As the truck's engine roared to life and the headlights illuminated the narrow forest road, Claire wondered what next could possibly look like. Her husband had just attempted to murder her via abandonment. She had no wheelchair, no medication, and was now in the company of an ex-boyfriend who had apparently been watching her house and following her car. Under any other circumstances, she might have been terrified. But looking at Adrian's stoic profile, illuminated intermittently by the dashboard lights, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Safety. The truck bounced along the rough road, heading deeper into the woods rather than back toward the city. Where are we going? Claire asked, realizing suddenly she had no idea where Adrian was taking her. I have a cabin about 20 minutes from here, he replied, eyes fixed on the difficult road ahead. It's isolated, but it has everything we need. Heat, running water, first aid supplies. You have a cabin in these woods? Claire couldn't hide the surprise in her voice. Adrian nodded. Bought it when I got back from my last tour. Needed a quiet place, away from people. A place to decompress, to heal. The word hung unspoken between them. Claire studied his profile more carefully, noticing the tension in his jaw, the careful control in his movements that suggested a man used to containing something powerful inside himself. Adrian, What happened to you after we broke up? For a long moment he remained silent, and Claire thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice measured. I did what I planned to do. Joined the special forces. Saw action in places I still can't talk about. Did things I wish I could forget. He took a breath. Then, about a year ago, an op went bad. Lost some good men. Got pretty banged up myself. He touched his side briefly, a gesture so quick, Claire almost missed it. They patched me up, gave me some medals, then decided I'd done enough. Honorable discharge. Sent me home to figure out what comes next. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Turns out, that's harder than it sounds. Claire absorbed this information, hearing both what he said and what was left unsaid. The boy she had known in college, idealistic and determined, had become a man shaped by combat and loss. Yet here he was, still stepping in to help someone in need, still putting himself on the line for others. I'm sorry, she said softly, unsure if she was apologizing for asking or for the hardships he had endured. Don't be. Adrian's expression softened slightly. We all make our choices. He glanced at her briefly, just like Richard made his tonight. The mention of her husband's name brought reality crashing back. Claire's hands began to shake as the enormity of it threatened to overwhelm her. He tried to kill me, she whispered, the words sounding unreal even as she spoke them. My husband drove me to the middle of nowhere and left me to die because I'm disabled, because I became an inconvenience. Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. Yes, he did, and he needs to be held accountable for it. How? Claire asked, despair coloring her voice. It's my word against his. He'll say I asked to go for a drive, that we had an argument, and I told him to leave me alone for a while, that he came back, and I was gone. She laughed bitterly. Who would believe a successful businessman would dump his disabled wife in the woods? I would, Adrian said. I just watched it happen. And I imagine there's more to the story. Things that happened before tonight that show a pattern. Claire fell silent, thinking of the months of emotional abuse, the isolation, the gradual takeover of her finances and business. There is, she admitted, but I'm not sure it's enough. Adrian turned the truck onto an even narrower track, barely visible in the trees. Let's focus on getting you safe and comfortable tonight. Tomorrow, we can start figuring out how to make him pay for what he's done. The word pay hung in the air with an edge that made Claire look sharply at Adrian. There was something in his tone, a controlled anger, a precision to his words, that reminded her this man had been trained to eliminate threats. Adrian, she said cautiously, whatever we do, it has to be legal. I don't want vengeance that lands either of us in jail. The truck slowed as they approached a small clearing. In the headlights, Claire could make out a rustic cabin, built of dark timber and stone. It looked solid, well-maintained, yet deliberately cut off from the world. Adrian parked the truck and turned to face her fully for the first time since rescuing her. I promise you, Claire, Richard will face justice for what he's done. Legal justice. His eyes, however, held a resolve that suggested he had very specific ideas about what that justice might entail. Chapter 3, Sanctuary and Strategy. As Adrian carried her into the cabin and settled her on a comfortable sofa near a wood-burning stove, Claire was struck by the bizarre turn her life had taken in just a few hours. This morning, she had been a trapped, diminished version of herself, enduring a loveless marriage. Now, she was in a cabin in the woods with a man from her past, a man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and stepped in without hesitation. The cabin was surprisingly comfortable inside, clean, well-organized, with a functional if stark aesthetic. Military precision was evident in the way everything had its place. Adrian efficiently built a fire in the stove, warmth spreading quickly through the main room. Hungry? He asked, moving to a small kitchenette. I don't have much, but I can make soup and sandwiches. Claire nodded, suddenly aware of the hollow feeling in her stomach. Whatever is easiest. As Adrian moved around the kitchen, Claire took the opportunity to really look at him. He was broader than she remembered, more solid, his movements economical and purposeful. "So," she said, trying to process, "you bought a cabin in the same forest where my husband decided to dump me. That's quite a coincidence." Adrian glanced over his shoulder as he stirred something on the stove. "It is, though these woods cover hundreds of thousands of acres, so the odds of him picking a spot near my place were actually pretty slim." He paused. "I chose this area because it's quiet, private, good for someone needing to adjust to civilian life. And you just happened to drive by my house today? After all these years?" Adrian went silent for a moment. "I've been back in Seattle for 2 months, doing some consulting, trying to figure out my next steps." He turned to face her. "About 3 weeks ago, I looked you up online, found out about your accident, saw you were married. I was going to reach out, maybe grab coffee, catch up. But then—" "But?" Claire prompted, sensing there was more. "But when I checked your social media, something didn't add up. No recent posts from you. Just Richard occasionally posting about how brave you were." His expression darkened. "I've seen how people can use social media to create a narrative that hides what's really happening. And knowing how you were in college, independent, vibrant, it didn't fit that you'd just vanish online." He went back to the stove, ladling soup into bowls. "So yes, I drove by your house a couple of times. Saw Richard coming and going, never saw you outside. Today was the first time I actually saw you, and something about the way he was handling you." He shook his head. "Military training makes you sensitive to certain things. Body language, signs of duress. I trust my gut." "And your gut told you to follow us into the woods?" Adrian placed a bowl of soup on the coffee table in front of her, along with a spoon and some crackers. "My gut told me something was wrong. Following was a personal choice." He looked at her directly. "One I'm glad I made." Claire couldn't argue with that. She picked up the soup bowl, inhaling the warm, comforting scent. "Thank you for following, for being here." Adrian sat in an armchair opposite her, his own bowl in hand. "You don't have to thank me for basic human decency, Claire." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the crackle of the fire and the occasional clink of spoons the only sounds. Claire's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened and what might come next. "Richard will report me missing," she said finally. "Once he realizes someone might have seen him in the woods, he'll spin some story about how I wandered off." Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "Likely. Which means we need to be strategic about our next steps." "I need to go to the police," Claire said. "Tell them what happened." "We will," Adrian agreed. "But first, we need to gather evidence. Your word against his might not be enough, especially if he's already creating a false narrative." Claire felt a flash of frustration. "What kind of evidence can we get? It happened in the middle of nowhere, in the dark." Adrian set his empty bowl aside and leaned forward. "You'd be surprised what leaves a trail. Text messages, financial records showing his control over your accounts, witnesses who might have seen his behavior change after your accident." He paused. "And my testimony about what I saw tonight. Will that be enough? Maybe, maybe not. But before we go to the cops, we should try to gather as much as we can." Adrian's expression was thoughtful. "Do you have access to your bank accounts, your email, financial records?" Claire shook her head. "Richard changed all my passwords after the accident. He said it was to protect me while I recovered." She laughed bitterly. "I realize now he was locking me out, taking control bit by bit. That's financial abuse, and it's actually helpful for building a case," Adrian said. "Do you remember any of your old passwords? Or do you have any accounts he doesn't know about?" Claire thought carefully. "I have an old university email account I'm pretty sure still works, and my parents left me a small trust in a separate account that Richard might not know about. I never touched it because we didn't need the money." Adrian nodded approvingly. That's good. Tomorrow we can start digging into that. See what kind of paper trail Richard has left. He hesitated. Claire, I need to ask you something. Do you want to punish Richard? Or do you just want to be free of him? The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Both, I think. I want him to face consequences for what he did, but mostly I want my life back, my independence. Then that's what we'll focus on, Adrian said firmly. Getting you free, safely, with the resources you need to rebuild. Claire was struck by his clarity, his focus on practical steps forward rather than dwelling on the horror of what had happened. It was exactly what she needed right now, not pity, but a partnership in finding a solution. Thank you, she said again, feeling tears threaten to rise. I still can't believe you found me, that you were there when I needed you most. Adrian's expression softened. Maybe it wasn't just coincidence. Maybe it was unfinished business. The phrase he had used earlier hung between them, heavy with history and unspoken feelings. Claire remembered their college breakup, painful but necessary, or so they had both believed at the time. She had wanted stability, a predictable future. He had been drawn to danger, to serving a cause bigger than himself. Why did you really look me up, Adrian, after all these years? He was silent for a long moment, the firelight playing across his features, highlighting the new lines around his eyes, the faint gray at his temples that hadn't been there in college. When you're in combat, he said finally, you learn to focus on the mission, on staying alive. You don't have time for regrets or what-ifs. He stared into the fire. But when it's quiet, when the mission is over, those thoughts come back, and one of mine was always you. Claire felt her heart skip a beat. I respected our decision to break up, Adrian continued slowly. We wanted different things, but after everything I've seen and done, I started wondering what my life would have looked like if I'd made different choices. His eyes met hers. If we had made different choices. The weight of those words settled between them, a bridge spanning the years and experiences that had made them both different people than they once were. I'm not the same person I was in college, Claire said softly, even before the accident. And afterwards, everything changes when your body betrays you. I'm not the same either, Adrian replied. War changes you. Seeing death up close changes you. He leaned forward. But some things don't change, Claire, like how I feel when I look at you. Even now, even after everything. Claire felt a complex mix of emotions, surprise, warmth, confusion. Her life had been upended in a matter of hours, and here was Adrian, a ghost from her past, speaking words that stirred something she thought was long buried. I can't think about that right now, she said honestly. Everything is too raw, too messy. Adrian nodded immediately. Of course, that was inappropriate timing on my part. He stood up, collecting their empty bowls. You need rest, not complications. As he headed towards the kitchen, Claire reached out and gently caught his wrist. I didn't say it was unwelcome. Just, not right now. Not yet. Their eyes met for a moment, an understanding passing between them. Then Adrian nodded and continued to the kitchen. Bedroom is through that door, he said, pointing. I changed the sheets this morning, so they're clean. I'll take the couch. Claire frowned. Adrian, this is your home. I can't take your bed. You can, and you will, he said firmly. You've been through hell today. You need proper rest. His tone softened. Please, Claire, let me do this for you. Too exhausted to argue further, Claire nodded. Do you have a t-shirt I could borrow to sleep in? Adrian disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a soft gray t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants. These will be huge on you, but they're clean. Thank you. Claire took the clothes, then hesitated. I'll need help getting to the bathroom, getting changed. A flicker of understanding crossed Adrian's face. Of course, just tell me what you need. With patience and dignity, Adrian helped Claire to the bathroom, waited outside while she used the facilities, then assisted her in changing into the borrowed clothes. His movements were clinical, respectful, focused on her comfort rather than her disability. It was a stark contrast to Richard's increasingly impatient help over the last year. Once Claire was settled in the comfortable bed, Adrian paused in the doorway. "If you need anything during the night, water, meds, help to the bathroom, just call out. I'm a light sleeper." Claire nodded, feeling sleep tugging at her. "Adrian, why do you have an accessible cabin?" She had noticed the wider doorways, the grab bars in the bathroom, features that made Adrian's cabin surprisingly navigable for someone in her condition. A shadow crossed his face. "I told you I got banged up on my last tour." He paused. "Doctors weren't sure if I'd walk again. I had the cabin modified while I was still in rehab, preparing for all possibilities." Claire processed this new information. "But you recovered." "I got lucky," Adrian said simply. "Others didn't." He turned away from the door. "Get some rest, Claire. Tomorrow, we start figuring out how to get your life back." As the door clicked softly shut behind him, Claire lay in the dark, her mind replaying the day's extraordinary events. Her husband had left her to die. Her college ex-boyfriend had saved her life. And somehow, improbably, she felt safer than she had in months. Wrapped in that strange comfort, Claire drifted into an exhausted sleep, unaware that the battle for her future was only just beginning. Mid-story. Can you imagine the strength Claire needs to face all this? What do you think she should do next to make sure Richard pays for his actions? Tell us in the comments. Chapter 4. Truth and Light. The next morning dawned clear and cold, a fitting backdrop for what Claire knew would be one of the most challenging days of her life. She woke early, her mind already racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The formal statement to the police, the potential confrontation with Richard, the public revelation of his betrayal. Adrian was already up, as she had expected. From her spot in the bed, Claire could hear him moving quietly through the cabin. His footsteps deliberate and measured, the occasional clink of a mug or rustle of paper, the only sounds breaking the morning silence. When she called his name, he appeared in the doorway almost immediately, freshly showered and dressed in clothes more formal than his usual cabin attire, dark jeans and a button-down shirt, suggesting he was preparing for their trip to the police station. "You awake?" His voice was soft. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected," Claire admitted. It was true. Despite the enormity of what lay ahead, she had slept deeply, perhaps a result of emotional exhaustion or the sense of safety Adrian's presence provided. "Detective Vance called," Adrian informed her, helping her sit up and arranging pillows behind her back. "The warrants were approved early this morning. Her team is preparing to execute them at your house and Richard's office at 9 a.m. Claire looked at the clock. 7:30. In 90 minutes, Richard's carefully constructed world would begin to crumble. The thought brought a complex mix of emotions: vindication, anxiety, and a lingering shadow of grief for what her marriage had become. "Julian and Rebecca will be here at 8:30 to drive us to the station," Adrian continued. "I made coffee and breakfast and—" He hesitated. "I thought you might want something different to wear for your statement." He gestured to a pile of neatly folded clothes on the dresser, a simple blue sweater and black trousers that Claire recognized as her own. "How did you get my clothes?" she asked, surprised. "Detective Vance brought them last night with your medication. She thought you might want familiar clothes for today." Adrian's expression softened. "She's good at her job, Claire. She understands that details matter." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, both from Detective Vance and from Adrian, for arranging it, touched Claire deeply. After so many months of Richard ignoring or minimizing her needs, this simple act of consideration felt profound. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything, Adrian. I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you." Adrian's expression turned serious. "You would have made it, Claire. You're stronger than you think." He paused. "But I'm glad I could be here. Now, let's get ready for the day ahead." With practiced efficiency that never crossed the line into impersonal handling, Adrian helped Claire to the bathroom, and then to the kitchen table where breakfast waited: scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. "Eat," he encouraged her. "You'll need strength today." As they ate, Adrian walked her through what Detective Vance had shared about the plan. Police will search your house and Richard's office simultaneously to prevent him from destroying evidence at either location. You will give your formal statement at the station with Rebecca present as your attorney. Once the statement is recorded, Detective Vance will personally arrest Richard on multiple charges: attempted murder, financial fraud, domestic abuse, and possibly more depending on what they find during the searches. Claire nodded, trying to mentally prepare herself for each step. "Will I have to see him? I mean, today?" "No," Adrian assured her. Detective Vance was very clear on that. They will keep you completely separate from him. Your safety is the priority. Relief washed over Claire, though she knew she would eventually have to face Richard in court. The thought of seeing him today, while the wound of his betrayal was still so fresh, had been weighing on her. "What about Valerie?" she asked, remembering the woman who had smiled as Richard wheeled her into the woods. "Detective Vance mentioned she will also be brought in for questioning," Adrian replied. Depending on her level of involvement and knowledge of Richard's plans, she could face charges as an accomplice. The sound of vehicles approaching interrupted their conversation. Through the window, Claire could see Julian's SUV and another unfamiliar car pulling up in front of the cabin. "That's our ride," Adrian said, helping Claire into her wheelchair. "Ready?" Claire took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. "Ready." Rebecca and Julian entered, accompanied by a woman Claire hadn't met before. Tall, with short silver hair and an air of quiet authority. "Claire, this is Sarah Lopez," Rebecca introduced her. "She's a victim advocate from the DA's office. She'll be with you through the legal process, ensuring your rights are protected and your needs are met." Sarah approached Claire with a warm, professional smile. "Ms. Sterling, I'm here to support you today and in the coming weeks. Whatever you need, explanations of legal procedures, accommodations for your disability, emotional support, that's what I'm here for." The thoroughness of the team Rebecca had assembled was both impressive and somewhat overwhelming. Claire had gone from being isolated and controlled to having 4 professionals dedicated to helping her get justice. "Thank you all," she said, voice choked with emotion. "I don't know what to say, except thank you." "Save your thanks for when Richard is behind bars," Julian said with grim satisfaction. "We should get moving. Traffic will be heavy this time of morning." As they prepared to leave, Adrian knelt beside Claire's wheelchair, his expression intensely serious. "I'll be with you the whole time," he promised, "but I need you to know something." He hesitated. "The media has picked up the story of your disappearance. Richard has been giving interviews, playing the desperate husband. Once you reappear and the truth comes out, there will be significant attention." Claire hadn't considered the media angle, but of course Richard would have used every tool available to control the narrative. The thought of reporters, cameras, and public scrutiny made her stomach churn with anxiety. "I don't know if I can handle that," she admitted. "Being some kind of public spectacle." "You don't have to," Sarah interrupted gently. "The police station has private entrances we can use, and you have every right to refuse interviews or public statements. Your focus should be on your case and your recovery, not on managing public perception." Adrian nodded. "Sarah's right. And for what it's worth, I think the truth speaks for itself in this case. You don't need to justify or explain yourself to anyone." Bolstered by their support, Claire allowed herself to be helped into Julian's specially equipped SUV, which had been modified to accommodate her wheelchair. Adrian sat beside her in the back seat, a steady presence as they headed towards Seattle and the confrontation that awaited them. The drive passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Rebecca briefed Claire on what to expect during her formal statement, emphasizing the importance of being detailed, chronological, and factual. Sarah provided reassurance about the process, explaining how the district attorney's office would handle the case moving forward. Through it all, Adrian remained silent but alert, his hand occasionally covering Claire's when her anxiety became visible. As they neared the city, Claire's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Richard's name flashed on the screen. The car went silent as everyone noticed. Claire stared at the phone, her heart pounding. "You don't have to answer," Rebecca said cautiously. "But if you did, on speakerphone, with us as witnesses," Claire understood immediately. This could be an opportunity to gather more evidence, perhaps even a confession from an increasingly desperate Richard. With trembling fingers, she answered the call, hitting the speaker button immediately. "Claire?" Richard's voice filled the car, a strange mix of relief and wariness. "Claire, is that you?" "Yes," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "It's me." "Thank God," he exhaled dramatically. "Where are you? I've been out of my mind with worry. The police are looking everywhere." The hamminess of their performance was so convincing that for a split second, Claire almost doubted her own memory of events. Then she looked at Adrian, saw the cold fury in his eyes as he listened to Richard's lies, and her resolve hardened. "I'm safe," she said simply. "Safe. Claire, you've been missing for 2 days. What happened? Where did you go?" Richard's voice rose with what sounded like genuine concern. "You know exactly what happened, Richard," Claire replied, her voice gaining strength. "You drove me into the forest and left me there to die." A pause. Then Richard's tone shifted, becoming softer, more condescending. "Claire, honey, that's not what happened. You're confused. We went for a drive." "Yes, but then you got upset. You said you needed space. I left to give you time to calm down, and when I came back, you were gone." Rebecca nodded encouragingly at Claire, signaling her to keep him talking. "That's not true," Claire said firmly. "You told me I was a burden. You left me without my wheelchair, knowing I couldn't get help on my own. You intended for me to die, out there." "Claire, listen to yourself," Richard said, his voice now tinged with exasperation. "This is exactly what I've been telling the police. Your emotional state has been extremely fragile. You've been having these paranoid thoughts lately, distorting reality." His voice softened artificially. "You need help, sweetie. Professional help. Come home, and we'll get you the best care." The calculated manipulation in his tone made Claire feel physically sick. This was the voice he had used for months to make her doubt herself, to rewrite reality to suit his narrative. "The only help I need is a good lawyer," Claire shot back, drawing strength from the supportive presence of those around her, which thankfully I now have. Another pause, longer this time. When Richard spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Colder, more calculating. "Who is with you, Claire? Who are you talking to?" "People who believe me," she replied simply. "People who aren't trying to gaslight me or rob me, or leave me for dead in the woods." "You are making a huge mistake," Richard said, all pretense of concern vanishing. "Whatever you think you're doing, whatever you think you know, you aren't going to win this. You're a disabled woman with documented emotional issues, and I have the best lawyers in Seattle." Adrian's hand tightened around Claire's, but he remained silent, letting her handle the conversation. "You're right about one thing, Richard," Claire said, surprising herself with the quiet confidence in her voice. "I am disabled, but that doesn't make me powerless, and it doesn't make me a liar." She paused. "The police are executing search warrants at our house and your office, right now. They'll find everything. The financial records, the fraudulent emails, the evidence of your affair with Valerie." "That's impossible," Richard scoffed, but she could hear the first tremor of uncertainty in his voice. There are no warrants. I would have been notified. Check your messages, Claire suggested, knowing from Detective Vance that officers would be at both locations by now. I have to go now. I'm on my way to give my statement about what really happened in the forest. Claire, wait. Richard's voice had lost its confident edge, replaced by something closer to panic. We can talk about this. Whatever you think I've done, we can fix it. No need for police or lawyers. There is every need, Claire replied. Goodbye, Richard. She ended the call. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her resolve was stronger than ever. Around her, the car was silent for a moment. Then Julian let out a low whistle. That, he said admiringly, was textbook. You just got him to essentially admit he knows exactly what happened in the woods, contradicting the story he's been telling the police and media. Rebecca was already taking notes. The shift in his tone when he realized you had legal representation was particularly telling. And the implied threat about his lawyers versus your credibility as a disabled woman. That won't play well in court. Claire leaned back in her seat, emotionally drained, but also experiencing a strange, fierce satisfaction. For the first time in a long time, she had directly confronted Richard's manipulation and come out with her truth intact. Adrian's hand still covered hers, his thumb moving in small, comforting circles. You were magnificent, he said quietly, eyes filled with a mix of pride and protectiveness. Absolutely magnificent. The rest of the drive passed in focused discussion as Rebecca and Sarah refined their strategy based on the revealing phone call. By the time they arrived at the police station, using a private entrance as promised, Claire felt ready for what lay ahead. Not just the formal statement, but the beginning of a process that would finally lead to justice. Detective Elisa Vance met them in a conference room, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes conveying satisfaction. The search warrants are being executed as we speak, she informed them. My team at your house has already found hidden financial documents in your husband's home office, records of accounts you knew nothing about, transfers of your business assets into his name. She paused. They also found emails between Richard and Valerie dating back months, discussing their relationship and, more importantly, discussing their plans for their future. What kind of plans? Claire asked, a chill running through her, despite the warmth of the room. Elisa's expression tightened. Let's just say the forest wasn't their first idea. They considered other, less spontaneous scenarios. Adrian's posture stiffened beside Claire, and she could feel the carefully controlled anger radiating from him. Are you saying they plan to kill me? Claire clarified, needing to hear the words directly. It appears they considered several options, Elisa confirmed. The emails are somewhat coded but clear enough to experts. Insurance policies, accidents, the potential legal ramifications of different scenarios. She looked at Claire directly. What happened in the woods wasn't an impulsive act, Ms. Sterling. It was the culmination of months of planning. The revelation hit Claire with physical force. She had known Richard had changed, become cruel and controlling, but the calculated nature of his betrayal, the deliberate planning of her death, was beyond what she had imagined. I need to step out for a moment, Adrian said suddenly, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. Excuse me. As he left the room, Rebecca moved closer to Claire, offering silent support. This is hard information to process, she acknowledged, but it actually strengthens our case considerably. Claire nodded, trying to focus on the legal implications rather than the personal devastation of learning just how thoroughly her husband had betrayed her. Detective Vance placed a file on the table. I need to take your formal statement now, Claire. We'll go through everything chronologically. Your relationship with Richard, when things started to change, the financial irregularities you noticed, and then what happened in the forest. Take your time. Be as detailed as possible. As Claire prepared to begin her statement, Adrian returned to the room, his composure restored. Though his eyes still held a shadow of barely contained fury, he sat down next to Claire. His silent, "I'm here," provided the anchor she needed. For the next hour, Claire methodically recounted her story. Her marriage to Richard, the accident that had left her disabled, how Richard's behavior had gradually shifted from supportive to controlling, her isolation from friends and family, the psychological manipulation, and finally, the abandonment in the forest. "And if Adrian hadn't found me," she concluded, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. "I have no doubt Richard intended for me to die there." Detective Vance nodded gravely as she finished taking notes. "Thank you, Claire. Your statement matches the evidence we've already gathered. We will be arresting Richard Sterling within the hour." "What happens after that?" Claire asked. "He'll be processed, charged, and arraigned," Sarah explained. "Given the severity of the charges and the evidence of premeditation, the DA will request he be held without bail," Rebecca added. "In the meantime, we'll file emergency protective orders, freezing your joint assets to prevent Richard from liquidating anything, and securing your interests in the house and business." Claire felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The weight of everything that had happened was finally settling on her shoulders. Adrian noticed immediately. "I think Claire needs a break," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Is there somewhere quiet she can rest for a bit?" Detective Vance nodded. "There's a comfortable witness room down the hall. I'll have someone bring you water and something to eat." As they settled into the quieter room, Adrian pulled a chair close to Claire's wheelchair. "You're doing incredibly well," he said softly. "But don't push yourself too hard. This is a marathon, not a sprint." Claire leaned back, closing her eyes briefly. "You know what the strangest thing about all this is? Part of me still can't believe Richard would do this to me, after 10 years together." "That's not strange at all," Adrian replied. "The Richard you married and the man who left you in those woods are different people in your mind, and rightfully so." "When did you know?" Claire asked suddenly, opening her eyes to look directly at Adrian. "When did you realize he had changed?" Adrian's expression turned solemn. "The last time I saw you both together, about a year ago. The way he interrupted you, dismissed your ideas about the business." He paused. "But I never imagined he'd go this far. I should have kept in touch. Should have watched closer." "You're here now," Claire said simply. "That's what matters." Their moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. Detective Vance entered, her expression professionally composed, but with an unmistakable glint of satisfaction in her eyes. "Richard Sterling is in custody," she announced. "And there's something else you should know. When our officers arrived at his office, he was in the process of transferring large sums from your joint business accounts to an offshore account. This makes our financial fraud case even stronger." Claire felt a complex rush of emotions: relief, vindication, and a deep sadness for the death of what she had once believed was a loving marriage. "What about Valerie?" she asked. "Also in custody. She was with Richard at his office, and her response to the arrest was illuminating. She immediately tried to distance herself, claiming she had no knowledge of his plans, but the emails we found contradict that." Adrian's hand found Claire's, offering silent support as Detective Vance continued. "I want you to be prepared. This will hit the news cycle soon. Richard has been quite visible in his search for you, giving tearful interviews. The revelation that he was actually the perpetrator will attract significant media attention." Claire nodded, steeling herself for what was to come. "I understand. My team is preparing a statement that communicates the facts without compromising the case," Detective Vance assured her. "You won't need to speak to the press." Before they could discuss further, Rebecca burst into the room, her usually composed demeanor animated by urgency. "We have a problem," she announced. "Richard's lawyer. It's Carlos Aguilar, the former district attorney." "Him?" Detective Vance asked, her expression darkening. "The same," Rebecca confirmed. "He's already making noise about insufficient evidence and claiming Claire's disability affects her mental capacity to give reliable testimony." Claire felt a chill. Carlos Aguilar was notorious in Seattle legal circles, ruthless, well-connected, and known for getting high-profile clients off on technicalities or by using aggressive tactics. He's trying to lay the groundwork for a mental competency challenge, Rebecca explained to Claire, suggesting your trauma from the accident has affected your perception of reality. Adrian's posture stiffened. That's absurd. Claire's disability is physical, not cognitive. It's a tactic, not reality, Rebecca assured them. But we need to be prepared for an ugly fight. Aguilar will try to paint Richard as the long-suffering husband dealing with a mentally unstable wife, and Valerie as an innocent friend trying to help. Claire straightened in her wheelchair, a cold determination hardening within her. "Let him try," she said, voice steady. "We have the evidence. We have the truth. And I refuse to be portrayed as a helpless, confused victim." Rebecca's expression shifted to one of admiration. "That is exactly the attitude we need." She hesitated, considering. "Actually, how would you feel about making a brief, controlled statement? Not to the media directly, but a recorded statement we release on our terms." "You want to counter their narrative before they can establish it?" Adrian observed. "Precisely." Rebecca nodded. A short, dignified statement from Claire, lucid, articulate, resolute, would make it very difficult for Aguilar to sell his confused, unstable wife's story. Claire considered the suggestion. The idea of exposing herself to the public eye was daunting, but the alternative, allowing Richard and his lawyer to control the narrative, was worse. "I'll do it," she decided. "But I want it to be factual and dignified. No emotional appeals or accusations that might look like I'm seeking sympathy." Detective Vance nodded approvingly. "That's the right approach. We can arrange the recording here. Controlled environment. Professional, but not institutional." As they prepared for the recording, Adrian helped Claire tidy up, his movements gentle as he brushed her hair and helped her adjust her clothes. "You don't have to do this," he reminded her quietly. "I know," Claire replied, "but I want to. For too long, Richard has been speaking for me, making decisions for me, telling the world who I am. It's time I took my voice back." When everything was ready, Claire sat facing the camera, posture straight, expression composed. Rebecca stood behind the camera, giving a silent countdown before nodding for Claire to begin. "My name is Claire Sterling," she began, voice clear and steady. "3 days ago, my husband, Richard Sterling, drove me to a remote location in the Olympic National Forest and abandoned me there without my wheelchair or any means of calling for help. This was not the result of confusion or misunderstanding on my part. It was a deliberate act, one that followed months of financial exploitation and emotional abuse." She paused, taking a measured breath before continuing. "I am disabled due to a car accident 2 years ago. This has limited my physical mobility, but not my mental capacity, nor my ability to recognize betrayal. I am cooperating fully with the authorities, who have gathered substantial evidence supporting my account of events." Claire's gaze remained direct, her voice unwavering. "I am deeply grateful to those who have helped bring the truth to light, and I have faith in our justice system to address this matter appropriately. I will be making no further public statements at this time, and ask for privacy as the legal process moves forward. Thank you." When the recording ended, the room was silent for a moment. The power of Claire's dignified testimony hung in the air. "Perfect," Rebecca said finally. "Absolutely perfect," Detective Vance agreed. "Clear, concise, and impossible to dismiss as the words of someone confused or unstable. We'll release this through official channels tonight." The rest of the day passed in a blur of legal preparations. Rebecca filed emergency motions to protect Claire's assets and business interests. Detective Vance provided updates on the investigation as her team uncovered more evidence from Richard's office and home. By late afternoon, exhaustion had set in. Adrian drove Claire back to his cabin, the forest that had almost been her grave, now ironically becoming her sanctuary from the media storm that had erupted following Richard's arrest. "The statement is out," Rebecca informed them by phone. "Initial public reaction is overwhelmingly supportive. Aguilar tried to counter with a press conference, but he looked desperate and defensive." Claire listened to the update with a strange sense of detachment. The events of the day, Richard's arrest, the revelation of his extensive conspiracy, her public statement, felt almost surreal. As Adrian prepared a simple dinner, Claire wheeled herself to the cabin's large window, looking out at the darkening forest. The same trees that had witnessed her abandonment now stood as sentinels to her recovery and growing resolve. There was something poetically just about that, she thought. "Penny for your thoughts?" Adrian asked, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Just thinking about cycles," Claire replied. "How the forest that was meant to be my end has become my beginning." Adrian knelt beside her wheelchair, his eyes meeting hers. "This is just the first step, Claire. The legal battle ahead won't be easy." "I know," she acknowledged. "But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm fighting for something, not just surviving. There's a difference." As they shared the quiet meal, discussing strategy for the days ahead, Claire realized that through trauma and betrayal, she had found something she thought lost forever: her own strength, and people who valued her exactly as she was. The sun set over the forest, bringing Act 4 to a close, as a new chapter in Claire's life began to take shape. One built not on dependency and manipulation, but on justice, truth, and the possibility of healing. Interaction question. What a turning point. Do you think this is the end of the battle for Claire, or just the start of a new war in court? Let us know. Chapter 5, Verdict and Rebirth. 6 months later, Claire sat in the courtroom, her wheelchair positioned at the end of the front row. Adrian was a constant presence beside her. The journey to this moment had been arduous. Depositions, hearings, motions, and counter-motions, as Richard's lawyer employed every tactic to delay and derail the proceedings. But now, finally, the jury was returning with their verdict. The last few months had transformed Claire in ways both subtle and profound. The frightened, isolated woman abandoned in the forest was gone, replaced by someone more resilient, more determined, and perhaps most importantly, surrounded by a support network she had rebuilt piece by piece. Her therapist, Dr. Perez, had helped her understand the patterns of Richard's abuse and her own responses to it. Rebecca had become not just her lawyer, but a friend, a fierce advocate. And Adrian had been her rock, never pushing, always supporting, his feelings for her evident but respectfully restrained as she navigated her trauma. The courtroom hushed as the jury filed in. Claire's hand found Adrian's, drawing strength from his quiet confidence. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Ruiz asked. The jury foreperson, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, stood up. "We have, Your Honor." Claire held her breath as the counts were read. Attempted murder, financial fraud, domestic abuse, conspiracy to commit murder. Count after count, the word guilty rang out in the courtroom. Richard, seated at the defense table, remained impassive, his shoulders rigid with tension. Beside him, Carlos Aguilar scribbled notes furiously, already planning appeals. When the final guilty verdict was announced, a soft sigh escaped Claire's lips. It wasn't triumph exactly, but relief. Relief that the truth had been heard and recognized, that justice, imperfect as it might be, had been served. Judge Ruiz scheduled sentencing for the following month, then addressed the courtroom. "I want to thank the jury for their service in this difficult case. Court is adjourned." As the room began to clear, Claire remained seated, processing the moment. Richard was led away in handcuffs, pausing briefly to look in her direction. Their eyes met across the courtroom. No words spoken, none needed, In his gaze, Claire saw not remorse, but cold calculation, even now measuring his chances of eventual appeal. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca fielded questions from the press, while Claire and Adrian slipped out a side entrance, avoiding the media-feeding frenzy. "How do you feel?" Adrian asked as they drove away from the courthouse. "Honestly, I'm not sure," Claire replied. "I thought I'd feel victorious or vindicated, but mostly, I just feel free, like I can finally stop looking over my shoulder and start looking forward." Adrian nodded understandingly. "That makes perfect sense. For you, this wasn't about winning. It was about getting your life back." "Exactly," Claire confirmed. "And speaking of getting my life back, I have something to show you." When they arrived at her destination, a small commercial building in a quiet part of Seattle, Claire asked Adrian to help her out of the car, waving away her wheelchair. "I want to do this on my own," she explained, accepting only his arm for balance as she carefully navigated the short distance to the building entrance using her cane. The physical therapy she had committed to over the last few months had yielded modest but significant improvements in her mobility. While still reliant on her wheelchair for longer distances, she had gradually regained the ability to walk short stretches with support. "What is this place?" Adrian asked as Claire unlocked the door. "The future," she replied with a smile, guiding him inside. The interior was a work in progress. Freshly painted walls, furniture still covered in protective plastic, computers waiting to be set up. But the sign above the reception desk was finished and proudly displayed. "Phoenix Accessibility Consulting. My new business," Claire explained, face lit with purpose. "We'll provide consulting services to companies trying to improve accessibility, not just physical accommodations, but inclusive hiring practices, adaptive technologies, the whole spectrum." Adrian looked around the space, realization dawning in his eyes. "You're turning your experience into a way to help others." "That's the plan," Claire confirmed. "I've already hired 2 consultants, one with visual impairment, another with hearing loss. We start taking clients next month." Pride filled Adrian's expression. "Claire, this is incredible. Truly. I couldn't have done it without you," she acknowledged. "Your support, your belief in me, when I couldn't believe in myself." "You did the hard work," Adrian countered. "I just had the privilege of witnessing it." They walked through the small office, Claire explaining her vision with growing enthusiasm. The business represented more than just a professional rebirth. It was her declaration of independence, her refusal to be defined by what had happened to her. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you," Claire said, as they finished the tour, her tone turning more serious. Adrian's cabin in the woods had become her sanctuary during the trial, a place away from the media scrutiny and painful memories of the home she had shared with Richard. But now, with the trial over, decisions had to be made. "I've been thinking about getting my own place," Claire continued, watching Adrian's face carefully. "Somewhere in the city, closer to the new office." A flicker of disappointment crossed Adrian's features before he composed himself. "Of course, that makes sense with your new business. But," Claire added, her voice softening, "I've also been thinking about us, about what we've become to each other these past few months." Adrian looked at her, allowing the depth of his feelings to show openly for the first time. "Claire, I would never presume." "I know," she interrupted gently. "You've been incredibly respectful of my space and my healing process. But I'm ready now, Adrian. Ready to explore what we could be together, beyond the crisis and the courtroom." The hope that bloomed in Adrian's eyes matched the lightness Claire felt in her own heart. The tentative joy of new beginnings, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine care. "I was thinking," she continued, "maybe we could find a place together. Somewhere not shadowed by either of our pasts. Not the woods, not my old house. Somewhere new." Adrian's smile was radiant. "I would like that very much." Their moment was interrupted by the chime of Claire's phone. It was Rebecca with news about the civil case against Valerie, who had received a more lenient sentence in exchange for testifying against Richard, but still faced significant financial penalties. As Claire took the call, Adrian walked to the large window overlooking the street, giving her privacy. Watching her, confident, engaged, directing her lawyer with clear purpose, he marveled at the transformation she had undergone. When the call ended, Adrian offered his hand. Ready to celebrate? The verdict? The new venture? Claire accepted his hand, using it for balance as she carefully stood up from where she had perched on a desk. Actually, I think I'd like to stay here a little longer. Just sit in this space and let the reality of it all sink in. Understanding perfectly, Adrian pulled 2 chairs together by the window. They sat side by side in companionable silence, watching the afternoon light move across the room that represented Claire's future. You know, Claire said after a while, when Richard left me in those woods, he thought he was ending my story. But really, he was just giving me the freedom to write a new one. Adrian's hand found hers, fingers interlacing naturally. And how does this new story look? Claire's gaze swept over her newly launched business, then returned to meet Adrian's eyes. It looks like purpose, she said. It looks like justice, not just for me, but hopefully for others through this work. She squeezed his hand gently. And, she added softly, it looks like real love, built on truth and respect. As the sun began to set outside, casting a golden glow across the room, they sat together in that moment of possibility. 2 people who had found each other through darkness, but were now moving forward into the light of a future neither could have imagined 6 months ago. In the distance, the courthouse stood as a reminder of justice served. Beyond that, the forest where Claire's journey of recovery had begun. And here, in this sunlit room, the promise of tomorrow stretched out before them. Not perfect, not without challenges, but authentically theirs to shape. We have reached the end of this powerful story. What do you think of Claire's ending? What message does this narrative of resilience and justice leave with you? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to our channel for more compelling tales like this one.